Welcome back to this third video in the series on Mastercam Mill-Turn Tool Locators. In this video, we're going to take a look at importing the models and then starting to define the tool locators. To start, we need to just figure out whether we want to work in inch or metric. We can choose either one, but we'll want to select the appropriate GMD to start with. From there, we're going to take a copy of the GMD that we're working with from its standard location and put it somewhere else to work with. We're going to rename that GMD with a dashed solids on the end of the name. This is going to be our version that we can go back to if we ever need to modify the actual solid models. Then we're going to import the solid models that we've already worked with in our preparation file. We can adjust any levels, colors, and orientations if necessary if we missed any of this in the preparation stage. The same would be true for the tool attachment points. If we haven't defined those yet, we can also add those in at this stage. Lastly, and most importantly, we want to verify that each locator had its attachment position at the Mastercam top origin. This is the position that will be used to locate each tool on the turret, so if it's wrong, then everything will be in the wrong place. Next, we want to start defining the tool locators. So we'll open the Tool Component Manager back up, and we're going to make a new tool locator. We can start with the upper turret, and we'll probably be moving to the lower turret if we're defining tools for both orientations. We need to provide a good descriptive name to the tool once we define it. We want to be able to easily identify it when we're selecting locators from within Mastercam. This typically includes the upper or lower turret designation, the size of the holder, its function, whether it's for turning or milling, and its orientation, whether it's used on the left or the right spindle. We also want to verify or select the turret attachment point. Most are only going to have a single attachment point on the outside diameter of the turret, but if you have more than one attachment point, just make sure you've picked the right one. Next, we're going to add and select all of the tool attachment points. These are where all of our tools will attach to each individual locator. You could have one or more. For each of those tool attachment points, we also want to define the orientation of the locator for that point. This basically is defining how that locator is used, whether it's for the left or the right spindle, whether it's horizontal or vertical, and whether it's a turning or milling tool. Next, we'll select the model. We can also pick the color that we've already chosen, or we can select a color of our choosing. Then we're just going to repeat those steps for any other tool locators that we need to add. Once we've added all the tool locators, we just want to double check that each of them is at the right position on the turret. We can double check that by visually showing each one on the turret. Next, we want to save it as the solids version of the GMD. Then we're going to convert it to the MCO version, and we're going to do a save as so that we can give it its original name again with either the inch or metric designation. Then we'll convert it to either inch or metric based on which one we originally worked with. And be sure to save as and give it the other designation. Lastly, we're going to open up the .machine file in Code Expert. We're going to drag and drop our new GMD files into the component tree, and then we're going to save the .machine file, which permanently applies those changes. Next, let's take a look at how we perform each of these steps. As I start the process to import my own models and define my tool locators, it's a good idea to start by organizing the files that you're going to work with. So what you can see here in this folder is I have two step files. These are the original files as downloaded from the manufacturer. I also have a Mastercam file. This is one where I've already merged in both of these tools that I want to add. I've organized them on levels, I've set the color, and I've also set up an orientation for each position that it's going to be loaded into this machine. So I've already done all my preparatory work in this Mastercam file. And that's the recommended process for doing this, it's a little bit more precarious to import the models directly into the GMD and perform a bunch of steps as far as moving and manipulating the files. It's much easier to organize them in a separate part file and then just merge them right in and start defining the locators. The other file I have here is just a simple text document. Now this is strictly just a recommendation. What you'll notice is that I've just added some pieces of information that are going to help me along in this process. I've given it the name of the levels that I'm using. I've came up with a name for the tool as I define it. I've included the manufacturer's number just to identify it within the tool locator. And I've also labeled out all of the different attachment points and what the names of those will be. As you'll see as we get into this, when you're creating a tool locator and having to redefine it for different orientations, it helps out a lot to have these names already copied down because we can simply copy and paste instead of having to retype them each time. The other file I have here is the .machine that I'm going to add these new changes to. Now, we talked about this in the last step. We want to start by extracting the GMD file and creating our own copy and modifying that. So one method of doing that is to actually just double-click on the .machine file. Once CodeXpert opens, I can actually just close it right away. All I really was trying to do was actually get the extracted contents of the .machine file. The other location you could find this subfolder is in the location where you normally store your .machine. You should find a subfolder, and inside of that are several of the components that make up that .machine. Two of those are the inch and metric GMDs. In this example, I'm just going to work in the inch system, so I'll grab a copy of this, I'll back up, and just paste it right into this folder to start working with. Now, I don't really need this folder anymore, but I can just leave it there in case for some reason I make a mistake and I need to go back and grab the original copy. The other thing that we talked about is we want to start by just renaming the GMD with a -solids. This will basically be our master copy of the GMD, where all of the locators we've added are left in a solid form. That way we still have the ability to go back and modify them later. As we complete this, we'll convert them to an MCO format. So the next thing I want to do is just open up the GMD file. So I'll go to Mastercam, we go to the Machine tab, and select the machine definition. This is a new icon in Mastercam 2020. We now have the option to select a Mill-Turn component library. Essentially, we'll call this the Mill-Turn Component Manager. This is the main window where we work and define the different tool locators. So we'll start by opening up that GMD that we just copied. We'll go to that folder and select the solid version. Now, one thing to note is all of the tools that are currently in this file are already converted to MCO format, so I won't be able to adjust any of the locators that are already in this file, but I will be able to adjust my own tools because I'm adding them in as solids to start with. For the next part of the process, we're just going to import our models first, and then we'll come back to this window to start defining them. So we can just hit the X, and we can go to our levels, and what we'll see is we already have the existing levels with all of the current tool locators set up in this file. Now we want to do a file merge. We're going to go to our folder that we're working out of, and here are our new tool locators that we'd like to merge in. I'll first clear the colors. And then what we can see is that it brought in all of the locators. Now there's two different levels, so by turning one off, I can see that one of the locators is a triple drilling boring holder, and I have one set up for the upper and lower turret. You can see we also have some points here. These will be where our tools will locate at. I've selected red points on one side of it and then green points on the other, just so I understand that the red ones are for the right side and the green ones are for the left side. Essentially, these points are 2 inches below the front face, which is a standard that I utilize across all drilling and mill tools. If we look at the other holder, this is going to be a Y-axis style turning holder. 4 different holders can be located inside one of these tool locators, and they'll have a particular orientation based on the tooling that you have at your disposal. You can also see that I've placed my points here where the tools will attach. Essentially, as we looked at before, this is towards the back of the holder. So now that we've imported our models, let's get started with defining these tools. We'll start off with the boring holder first. In order to open the Mill-Turn Component Manager again, I simply need to go back to the Machine tab and select the machine definition again. It'll bring up the same GMD because we're still within the same environment, and now we're ready to start adding these tools. We'll start by adding the upper turret version. And we'll just simply right-click on the turret and say Add Locator. Now the first thing that I want to do is start pulling up the text that I've set aside, because that's going to help me to just easily copy and paste the information in. The first one that I'm doing is this triple boring holder. Now this first description is what I already had applied to the level. So the name that I'm looking for now is what's going to be visible to you as the end user when you're selecting this tool in Mastercam. So we're designating that it's the upper turret, we're designating that it's a Nikon brand, and this is a triple axial drilling boring holder. You will find sometimes you'll have to abbreviate the name in order to fit it in there, but that's what we want to place here under the name. Now the comment is typically just something that we leave just for like a manufacturer's number. This won't be visible to the end user, but it's more so for anyone coming in to make modifications. They'll get some indication where this came from. So it's not required, but it's just another helpful piece of information that you may find useful someday. So we'll also copy that here into our comment block. The next thing we want to do is just check the attachment point. Now this specific turret only has tools that mount to the OD of the turret, so I only have one attachment point. Next, we want to start by defining the first station or tool attachment point. This does have a name, a description, and then each of the stations actually has a specific orientation that we need to define for it. So let's start with the first one. And this will be for the left spindle in the upper position. We'll simply copy and paste that in here. I typically just use the same name and description or comment. That creates the first station. Now, I do tend to like to add all the stations at once, so we'll right-click and hit Add to add a second one. We'll grab the next one. This will be the one that's in the middle. Now that I'm done defining all the different stations, I need to go through them one by one and apply the appropriate tool type and tool orientation. Let's start with the first one. So this is the left spindle upper position. In order to be able to select a drill and center drill, I actually have to make sure that my orientation is correct first. So currently it's set to a cross tool. I want to set it to a facing tool. Additionally, I want to verify that I have it set to the correct side. We're working on the left side. Now I need to tell it what type of tools this locator or this station number will accept. It can accept fixed tools with the insert up, insert down, and any drills or center tools. Now in this case, the insert up and insert down would be for like a boring tool that could be positioned with the insert up or insert down. And all of these are fixed tools, meaning they're not spinning. The last thing that I need to do is I need to select the actual position on the locator where this tool mounts. So I just need to carefully pay attention to which one I'm selecting so that it has the appropriate position. So I want to go to the left side and pick the upper position. In this case, I'll need to activate the level. And I don't want to get confused by both models. Now, in this case, I'm working on the upper turret, which means I need to work with this model that's here on the lower side of X. I'll come here, we were doing the left side, and we were doing the upper position. So this is the point that I want to pick. And it's applied all the values to place that tool exactly in that position. Then I basically just need to go through and do the same steps for the other ones. I'll move to the middle. The first thing I'll do is set the orientation to face left. I'll select all the same options, and then I just need to pick the locator position. Reactivate the solid on the level, and I'll select that point in the middle. From here, we basically just want to go through the rest of the tools and perform the exact same steps. As I move to the right side, I just need to remember to set the tool orientation properly. I'm going to select the facing tool again. In this case, though, I want to select right, and then I can apply all the same tool types. As I go out to the model, I just want to make sure that I switch around to the opposite side and pick my points from the right side. Now I've completed all 6 positions, but I want to step back to a step that I actually passed over when we first started creating the stations. We didn't pay attention to the tool holder position. This is another setting that applies to each of these specific stations. Now what the tool holder position does is it tells it where on the tool it will match up to the attachment point. In this case, because we're always talking about a drill or a boring bar, this location is always going to be at the center of the tool. So for each of these stations, they've all been set at the center of the tool. The next step is just to jump over to the Geometry tab, and this is where we actually pick the solid model. Now in the geometry type, we want to select this as a solid entity, and then select entity. From here, I'm just going to go to an isometric view just to make sure I'm selecting the correct model. Again, I want to make sure it's the one on the lower side of X because I'm working on the upper turret. And from here, I can say to set the component color from the solid. If I don't do this, I also have the option to set a color while I'm in this window, but it just helps to pull it right from the model. From here, I should be all done. I can just green check. And if I scroll down to the bottom of the list, now I can see my new tool locator. Now another step that's nice at this point is to just double check and make sure it mounts to the turret properly. To do this, I'm going to uncheck the upper tool group. I'm going to come down and only select this one and also select the upper turret. Now, if I right click on this, I can tell it to view the component and the parent. What this does is it shows me the turret and the tool locator shifted into its proper position. As I can see by looking at it, everything looks correct. The tool is in the center and it's sitting right on the face of the turret. At this point, we want to go ahead and define our second tool, which is for turning. We'll just right-click on the upper turret, add a new tool locator, and then we need to start going through the same steps. To save a little time, I've gone through most of the steps for defining this tool, but I'm going to step through them with you. We've defined a name, we've given it a comment, we've verified the attachment position, we've gone through and defined each of the stations that are used on this tool. You can see here that this tool has 2 positions on the left side and 2 positions on the right side. Both of the positions on the left, the insert is face down, and on the right, they're always face up. Now you can see for each attachment station, we've defined exactly what it can use. So for the insert down, I've only selected insert down. This prevents a user from adding a tool where the insert is face up. I've also defined this as a cross-turning tool, and it's on the left side. Same thing for the one below it. The next one is the right spindle. There again, the insert is up, so I've only selected the insert up. I've also defined it as a cross tool, but this time it's in the right cross orientation. So the next step really is just to go through each of these and make sure the attachment position is correct, and also make sure we select the point off of the locator. Now I can select the point first just to make sure I know exactly which corner I want to select. So we'll start with the first one, which is the insert down on the left side upper position. Because we're working on the upper turret, we want to be sure that we're working with the tool locator that's on the lower side of the x-axis. Because I've already added the points here, we're working on the upper portion, and there's my attachment point that I want to select. Now keep in mind that this tool is insert down, so we want to pick the inner corner on the same side as the insert. So in this case, this tool is inside of the holder and it's face down, so this is the inner corner that I want on the top face of that tool. So that's my attachment point. Then I'll just do the same step for the next tool. This one's in the same orientation, the only difference is just in the lower position. So I'll pick the lower position. Pick the same spot on the tool, and I'm all set with those ones. Next we'll move on to the right side. For this one I'm going to go ahead and pick the tool first. Now this one is the insert up. We'll rotate around to the other side. We're on the upper side, and we said that the insert is up. Now if the insert's up, that means that our insert is actually on this upper side, and our tool locator position is on the bottom of the tool. So in this case, the attachment position is actually going to be on the side of the insert, but on the bottom of the tool instead of the top. So in this case, we're going to, instead of using the top corner, we're just using the bottom corner. And then we'll just complete the last one. Once I'm all done selecting the points, I can just go over to the Geometry tab, verify it's set to solid entity, and then select the tool holder itself. We'll set the color from the solid, and then I'm all done. Just like we did with the other tool, it's not a bad idea at this point to just right-click and view the group. There I can see that my tool locator positioned properly on the turret, it's in the center, and everything looks correct. At this point, all I need to do is go through the same steps to define the exact same holders for the lower turret. The only difference is I'll be utilizing the models that are now on the upper side of the x-axis and all the points that go with them. We're not going to go through all those steps because they're really just all identical to what we just did, other than just paying attention to the orientation that we're picking for each tool. After we're done adding all the tool locators that we need, we're ready to save our GMD. So we can just simply hit save, and this will save our solid version. Next, we want to create the MCO versions of each of these for inch and metric. So first we need to convert this into the MCO format. We want to select the option to delete original geometry and replace it with an MCO. We also want to apply the proper tolerance. This will differ depending on whether you're in inch or metric. For inch, we want to enter 0.0125. If we are working in metric, then the value would be 0.25. Once we're done, we can green check. It's going to verify that we know it's going to delete the solid models. We just hit yes. And then at this point, I don't want to hit save. I want to remember to hit save as, because I want to create this now as the non-solid version. So I'm going to save it back into the same file, and all I'm going to do is actually just take off the original solid that we added to the name. Now I have my inch version. The next step is to create the metric version. For this, we can just right-click on the component group and say Convert Inches to Metric. After it's converted, we do another Save As. Go back into the same folder. I'll select the inch one, and then all I need to change is just to change the end of the name to for metric. Hit enter. At this point, we've created all the files that we need, so we can simply close out of the GMD. We can also close out of the part file. And we'll go ahead and open up Code Expert. Now we can do this by opening it directly, or we can just double click on our .machine again. Once Code Expert opens up, we'll see over here in the Machine Explorer that all the files are grayed out except for the GMD files. To replace these, I'm going to open up my folder again and simply take the inch and the metric versions and copy them back into the original subfolder. I'll tell it to replace. And what I can see now is that it's registered that change over here in the machine tree. All I need to do is just select either one of the files and hit Save. The process of saving makes those changes permanent in the .machine file, which means the next time I open up this .machine file, these are the GMDs that it's going to use. Now I can take this machine file and move it back to its original location and start utilizing the new tools I've added. The last step that we want to do is just to take a quick look at the tool locators that we've added, just to make sure that the tools are loading into them as we expect. Now I've set up a simple test part here just so I can take a look at the locators. In my Lathe Tool Manager, I've defined several tools to be used in the different positions. So I'm going to load all of the turning tools on position 1 with different offsets for each side and tool. And then I'm going to load 2 drills and a boring bar into position 4 of the triple boring drilling holder, each with their own offset as well. I've also gone through and just labeled them so I know exactly where they go in the tools. We'll open up the Tool Manager, or the Tool Locator Manager, and we'll find the new holders that we have. Now I only added them to the upper turret for this example, but here's the 2 that we've added in. Now the Y-axis turning one was used on position 1, and the triple boring drilling was on position 4. If we expand these now, we can see all the positions clearly identified. These are all the labels that we set up when we defined the tool. And you can see now why it's useful to have a good descriptive name as well as a descriptive name for each of the attachment points. Now I can just go to my tools and drag them onto each corresponding position. So we'll start with the right lower. So right lower position, left lower. There's my left lower, right upper, my right upper, and my left upper. So I've dragged all those tools on. Now I'll take a look at the triple boring holder. I'm only going to load them in the left side, so I have the left bottom, I have the left top, and I have the left middle. Now I can just take a look at them by right-clicking on it, viewing the component and children. Now what you can see is all the tools are properly loaded into each position. So an indication that you may have made a mistake would be that the tool was maybe on the opposite side of the actual slot that it's supposed to go into. You can also see that all the tools are starting from the attachment point that we defined at the back of the holder here. So that's how they're all projected from that point. Next, we'll take a look at the triple drill boring holder. With this one as well, you can see that all the tools are properly oriented in the middle of the holder, and they're all basically starting 2 inches past the front face, which is where we put the locator positions for each of the holders. Now we'll take a quick look back here in the Tool Manager. As you can see, the locator positions are at the back of every tool for a turning holder, And for a drill, it's going to be the back of the actual holder. So this is a combination of the holder definition and the drill length itself. On the boring tool, of course, it's just the total length of the boring tool. In some separate videos, we'll take a look at some other unique styles of tools that you may also encounter, but for the most part, the process is going to be the same. And now that you've seen all the different steps to add tool locators, you should be able to start doing this yourself.